Good morning, and thank you, and welcome, and thank you for tuning in to this session. I'm not sure whether we are yet properly online. There is no picture on my screen. I'm assuming that everybody can hear me, and the audio is good. Okay. My screen is not showing anything at the moment, but let's continue. So welcome everybody to this general meeting of ITM Power PLC. There are two things that we would like to do this morning. The first informal session as a general meeting. That meeting has been convened for the purpose of seeking shareholder authority, which is necessary to implement the fundraising described in the circular to shareholders of the 23rd of October. 2020. In addition to that, and once that formal session is complete, we will be hearing again from our CEO, Dr. Graham Cooley. At the AGM last week, we invited shareholders to let us know whether they had any particular questions arising from the presentation that they heard on that occasion. We have had two questions, one on prospects for the company in the United States, given that environment is now a little higher on the agenda than it has been before, and secondly, a more general question about the company's prospects for 2021 and onwards. If there are any further questions that shareholders would like to ask, please do use the facility, the chat facility on the right-hand side of your screens, and Graham will address those questions as well. So we will turn to Graham in a few minutes' time. First of all, I would like please to turn to the formal business of the EGM. If the slides could please be put up on screen. There we are. The current restrictions, COVID restrictions, mean that again we're having to do this by this online presentation rather than a physical meeting in the normal way. But we're grateful to shareholders for tuning in the way that you have. Again, because of the exceptional circumstances, we've had to conduct the voting of each of the resolutions we're going to look at through the proxy process that we used last time, of course, rather than the usual show of hands. So we have two resolutions to consider in the formal part of our process this morning, and I would now like to move to those two resolutions. I can adjust these slides. There is a brief summary slide. I will turn to each of the resolutions in turn, but there is a summary slide showing that on each of the left-hand side of each of these resolutions, proxy vote shows more than a 99% rate of approval, which is very welcome. The first resolution to consider is an ordinary resolution, resolution number 1, seeking authority to allot shares in connection with the firm placing, the open offer, and the share subscription. This resolution will grant the directors authority to allot ordinary shares in the company up to an aggregate nominal amount of £3,659,845 for the purposes of the firm placing, the open offer, and the share subscription. The authority given by this resolution will expire 90 days after the date of the passing of the resolution. I therefore would like to propose this resolution as an ordinary resolution, and I report the votes cast by proxy, which you will see on the screen in front of you. Total votes cast, 191,772,265. In favour, and with the chairman, 191,464,538. Against, 228,270. And votes withheld, 187,757. Those votes for the discretion of the chair will be included as in favour of the resolution. And I therefore declare that this resolution has been carried. I would now like to turn to resolution number 2. If I can, there we go. Resolution number 2 is about the disapplication of preemption provisions, conditional on the passing of Resolution 1. Resolution 2 disapplies statutory preemption rights in connection with the authority conferred under Resolution 1. Again, I report the votes cast by proxy. Total votes cast, 191,772,265. In favour, and with the chairman, 190,125,489. Those against, 1,459,019. And withheld, 187,757. And again, those votes for the discretion of the chair are included as in favour of the resolution. So I therefore declare this resolution carried. That, ladies and gentlemen, is all that we need to do on the agenda this morning of the formal general meeting. So thank you very much for your patience in helping me through that. I would now like to declare the formal part, the general meeting itself, closed. And as indicated earlier, I will now give the floor to Dr. Cooley to deal with 2 questions that were raised subsequent to the annual general meeting last week. The first one, Graham, with environment now high on the American agenda, what opportunities and challenges do we see in America? Graham, over to you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Roger. So a great question to start with. So much has changed in the US over the last week, of course. And we now see with Joe Biden's incoming administration, a new emphasis on net zero, signing the Paris Accord and renewables. And the current plan, as stated, is to sign the Paris Agreement to get to net zero by 2050, and included an earlier date of 2035 to get to energy production in the US as carbon zero by 2035. The budget, early budget that's stated, is 2 trillion over the next 4 years. Now, if you compare that with the EU Green Recovery Plan, which is 1 trillion over the next decade, you can see it's a very, very significant program. And of course, 2 differences with the EU. One is that it's going into law early next year, and the other is that there's a explicitly stated target for hydrogen, which is 150 billion euros over the next decade. So we'll see if that gets through the House and the Senate. But if it does, it's a very, very significant plan. And so consequently, the US as a territory for green hydrogen becomes very much more significant than it has been over the last 4 years. We work very closely with Linde and Praxair in the US. And there is a rule at the moment in the US about Buy America. It's not clear what the future of that rule will be, but we're certainly working with Linde and Praxair in the US to define the US supply chain. So I think the answer to the question is it's very much on our agenda again, since all of the policy changes seem to be now pointing in the favor of green hydrogen. So that was the first question. Second question is about our platform roadmap. Now, I'm assuming by platform, it's a discussion about product platform. Our platform is basically this. We have 3 standard products, 0.7, 1.4, and 2.1 megawatt containerized units. And they're the ones we sell directly to customers. We tend to use those products with projects that are up to somewhere around 8 megawatts in size. And then above that, the projects tend to have significant EPC contracts, in which case they become ITM Linde electrolysis projects. And those are based on 2 megawatt modules or 5 megawatt modules, which we refer to in ITM as cubes. And those are then brought together with EPC contracts from Linde Engineering via ILE. The whole principle of this is that we make the same thing in our factory over and over again. We stick to the part that we're good at, and Linde take on the advantage of the EPC contract, but also the risks associated with the EPC contracting, which isn't really in ITM Power's skill set. So to answer the question then, we have a very well-defined platform and roadmap. We raised money to accelerate the 5 megawatt cube, so it's available 2 years early, and we use the same products for every market. So I hope that's an adequate answer to your 2 questions. And I think we're happy to take a couple of extra questions through the chat function if anyone wants to do that.
Thank you, Graham. I can't see any additional questions at this point in the chat column, unless somebody is seeing something I can't. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so Robert, yes, it is a chicken and egg situation. I think all the car companies are certainly developing or have developed or have launched hydrogen vehicles. Our emphasis in ITM Motive is now much heavier vehicles, so buses and trucks and trains. We'll be rolling most of those large-scale refueling stations out with the capability of being able to also refuel cars. But you need an anchor demand to get a return on capital employed. So our stations going forwards will be very similar to the Birmingham bus refueling station, where we have an anchor demand from 20 buses. We have a long-term fuel contract with National Express, but we also have a 700 bar dispenser where we can dispense some slightly higher value fuel to cars as well. We call this principle a refueling hub. But the reason that we are rolling out larger stations now is so that we get an anchor demand with a firm long-term fuel contract so that we can guarantee a return on capital employed. And I think as those networks grow, so the network for refueling cars will also grow.
Hmm. Yep, I can see them now. Thank you for the guidance. So the second question is, how much are you placing on maintaining and advancing the technology lead?
Yeah, so a significant amount actually. If you look at the funding round of 170 million, about a quarter of that was dedicated to technology development and accelerating the large-scale plant. So actually quite a significant emphasis on larger scale equipment. Also, what's very important from a technology point of view is operations, monitoring, and having an expert package worldwide for after sales support. And that was about another third of the funding. So I would say a very significant emphasis on that.
The next question, Graham, is this: can we get an update on the new factory, please? When will the first modules produced at Bessemer Park roll out?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is that we have the two factories will be running in parallel until the first quarter of next year. We're moving the equipment in this month, and we will start the process of readying it for production at the end of the year. So first weeks in 2021 is the answer.
Okay, and the next question is this: is there a plan to place your equipment on offshore turbines taking hydrogen to shore?
Yeah, not currently. We made an announcement of working with Orsted, where we directly integrate electrolysis with wind turbines. That did mention the possibility of being able to do it offshore. I think offshore is some time off because of the logistics of working offshore. But the whole principle of that project was to integrate the power electronics between the turbine and the electrolyzer. And there is some strong merit in doing that. You reduce the cost of the power electronics, which means that you can make turbines which directly make hydrogen rather than going via electrons. And if we were to deploy such a turbine, we would start onshore. But there is a possibility in the future of doing it offshore. But the principle still stands for onshore electrolysis.
Okay, thank you, Graham. The next question is, do you have plans for more large-scale refinery electrolyzers after, the question has gone, after the Shell refinery in Germany?
Yeah, very much so. Refineries is a very early market for green hydrogen. The reason is that refinery hydrogen, green hydrogen at refineries, has been included in the Renewable Energy Directive. So all refineries have an obligation to make 14% of their product renewably by 2030. So they're all looking at electrolyzers at refineries. We have two projects at the moment. One is with Shell at the Rhineland refinery, and Shell recently announced their center for green hydrogen at refineries for Germany would be at the Rhineland refinery. We also work with Phillips 66 in Humberside, doing the same thing, connecting directly to Hornsey to make hydrogen for the green hydrogen for the Phillips 66 refinery. And there are other refinery projects being announced all of the time. So the principle of making green hydrogen at refineries is high on the agenda of all European oil and gas companies because of the RED II legislation.
Thank you, Graham. One question which I skipped over, apologies, and it leads on from an earlier question on transport, will there be no more Shell forecourt installations until after truck demand is established?
Yeah, the Shell forecourts projects have been very well analysed. I think that some of them are going to be expanded in size, and not only expanded in terms of electrolysis, but also in terms of the amount of storage. And we are looking at demand for trucks and buses using those forecourts. Will there be any further forecourts with Shell? That's a discussion that I can't disclose to you, but certainly we work very closely with Shell, both in Germany and in the UK.
And the next question, Graham, is do you see a significant use of hydrogen in Africa in the near future? Does ITM have any connections over there?
Yeah, Africa is interesting. I think if you look at the European report called 40 plus 40 megawatts, 40 plus 40 gigawatts. The target for the EU over the next decade is 40 gigawatts plus 40 gigawatts equivalent of green hydrogen imports. And the center that's developing for exporting that green hydrogen to the EU is certainly in countries like Morocco. So there is a great and very low cost solar resource that can be used to make green hydrogen and imported into the EU. So that's part of the EU's plan. And 40 gigawatts is a very significant amount of electrolysis. But the reason for targeting countries like Morocco is the very, very low cost of solar. So does ITM specifically have plans? Well, currently we're talking to our partners, and there are many renewable energy companies who are interested in such a strategy.
Graham, thank you. The next one is, I guess so far we've not heard from the UK government what future grants for fueling hubs might be forthcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the white paper is being announced next week. That white paper won't necessarily have in it a hydrogen strategy. So there'll be some references to hydrogen, but the main hydrogen strategy from the UK government is being announced the first quarter in 2021. So I'm a member of the Hydrogen Advisory Council, which meets regularly with the Energy Minister, and we are developing the hydrogen strategy for the UK. And you will have, I believe, a very well articulated hydrogen strategy Q1 2021, which will include industrial hydrogen, hydrogen for the gas grid, and also transport.
Graham, thank you. The next one is about Orsted and Yara, Orsted and BP. What are the chances for PEM being chosen?
So there have been some announcements. You probably saw the BP Orsted announcement of 200 megawatts, which is a refinery project, and also the Orsted Yara project in Zeeland. We obviously work very closely with Orsted, and we're very aware of those projects, but we don't have anything at the moment that we can comment on.
Okay, and Graham, the next one, hydrogen-powered cars will only appeal to the public when the costs of hydrogen fuel, presently much higher on a cost per mile basis than petrol or diesel alternatives. Is the cost of hydrogen fuel for the road user expected to reach parity with the alternatives in the near future, which would help massively with the national rollout of hydrogen-powered vehicles?
Yeah, so it's not a cost issue. So we are actually at the same cost per mile as petrol when you're selling at somewhere between 10 and 12 pounds a kilogram. So it's not really a cost issue. It's more of an issue about rolling out the infrastructure. And of course, as you have more infrastructure and you have volumes of hydrogen being created, then the cost comes down. For heavier vehicles with long-term fueling contracts, we are at parity with diesel. However, the UK government is still subsidising diesel for buses. And so the irony is that no more petrol and diesel vehicles, new vehicles, will be registered after 2035. But currently, the UK government is still subsidising diesel for buses. But we signed our first long-term contract with a bus operator for green hydrogen in Birmingham, and we can get to somewhere close to parity with diesel, so long as we have a large refueling station and we get a long-term contract. So they're the issues. Now, the final part to this is the RTFO, which is the Renewable Transport Fuels Certificates or Obligation. So ITM Power was the first company to achieve an RTFO on a refueling station. That's the one at AMP. And we've achieved that because it's directly coupled to wind power. The problem with the RTFO today in the UK is you can only access it if you're directly coupled, not if you have a renewable energy contract. And part of the hydrogen strategy that we're discussing with the DFT is to change that. So very similar to other countries around the world, you can buy a renewable energy contract, make your hydrogen under a renewable power contract, and get the renewable fuels obligations. And we work closely with Orsted in this area. That makes an incredible difference to the cost comparison between green hydrogen and diesel.
Mm-hmm. Graham, the next question is, do you have a target for electrolyzer market share?
Do we have a target for electrolyzer market share? I think we're very ambitious people. We push as hard as we can on every project that we see in territories, of course, where we have a presence. The territories where we have a presence are much larger now because of our work with Linde Engineering and also our developing relationship with SNAM. So I think our scope is wider, our access to markets is larger, and we are pushing as hard as we can in every appropriate project. But I wouldn't want to put out a percentage number. I can just tell you this, that the market's huge. And we have a fantastic offering, both in terms of technology, and we're also the first company to move into a gigafactory, which means that we can actually fulfill the orders because we have the manufacturing capacity. So in terms of technology, manufacturing and partnerships, I think we're in a very, very strong position.
The next question, Graham, is on the impact of Brexit. Will Brexit isolate ITM from EU green programs?
First of all, we don't know what the outcome of Brexit is yet, but I think ITM Power has put probably more plans in place for Brexit than any other energy company that I know. So we work with Shell, with Linde, and now with SNAM. You know, that's Shell are headquartered in The Hague in the Netherlands, Linde in Germany, and SNAM in Italy. So our partnerships that we have developed are directed towards us being able to go through what I think for UK industry may be a difficult transition. We put in place the funding required to build a European factory, should that be required. So I feel like we've made very significant provisions for Brexit. The other thing I would say is that we have spent some considerable time with UK politicians explaining that the UK should remain in Horizon Europe. And Horizon Europe is the replacement for Horizon 2020. And Horizon Europe is where most of the development funding will come for hydrogen, as well as the energy pillar. And so I would hope that the result of the negotiations with the EU are that UK stay in that mechanism. And that's not only important for UK industry, it's fundamentally important for British universities as well.
Graham, the next one is, are you seeing any direct competition in the market?
Yeah, of course. There's always competition. If you're in a great market, you'll always have competitors. There's no, a better question is there anyone we're afraid of? And the answer is no. I think we have a great technology, manufacturing and partners, and I don't think anyone else in the market has got that suite of partnerships that we have. Look, one company can't create such a huge market on its own. And, you know, we see competition and we will see increasing competition. But we've been doing this for 20 years. We have a significant lead. I would say the best technology in the market. And so there's no one we fear particularly.
And the next one, Graham, when do we expect to start the manufacture of 2 megawatt electrolyzers?
We're already 2 megawatt modules. We're doing that at the moment. Rhineland Refinery, they're all factory acceptance tested and being delivered. So quite some time ago.
And the next one is, what plans for the Southwest, as it's a net exporter of renewable energy, wind and solar?
Yeah, the Southwest of the UK. So a lot of very interesting work going on in the Southwest. The Southwest. Yeah, not so much in the Southwest, actually. The centres of demand in the UK were defined by BEIS are very well articulated to be Humberside, Teesside, South Wales as the 3 largest right now. That's because of refineries, methanol production, and also steel making. And so they tend to be the places where industry is really gearing up to use green hydrogen. And you have a lot of offshore wind, of course, off the coast, North Sea coast, around Humberside, Teesside as well. So I think that for the UK, you'll find will be the policy emphasis.
And Graham, when do we expect to see price parity between blue and green hydrogen?
Price parity between blue and green hydrogen depends on the renewable power price. So it depends upon the price of methane, the cost of storing the CO2 and the pipelines on one side, and on the other side, the cost of green hydrogen. It is dependent on the cost of renewable power, the cost of the electrolyzers, and the load factor of the electrolyzer. So cost parity in the UK is somewhere around 4 pence per kilowatt hour, gives you $3.2 per kilogram, which according to the McKinsey model is cost parity with blue hydrogen. So our project at the Humberside is basically around cost parity. Although I would say nobody yet knows how much blue hydrogen is going to cost, because there has not been a large CCS scheme ever built.
Graham, thank you. We've got time, I think, for just a couple more questions. Others on top of that, I will invite shareholders to let us know separately.
Yeah.
A message from Robert, thanking you for the great answer to his question. Thank you, Robert, for taking the time to say that. The next question is, what footprint area does a 100 megawatt alkaline electrolyzer require?
An alkaline electrolyzer? We don't make alkaline electrolyzers. I can tell you it's probably about 50% more than a PEM electrolyzer, but we don't make alkaline, and I wouldn't make any statements about that. You'd have to ask an alkaline electrolyzer manufacturer about that.
And the next question is, how will hydrogen-powered cars compete with the ability of electric cars to charge at home?
Yeah, I mean, the whole model with hydrogen is not to charge or refuel at home, but to do it at refueling stations. The problem with doing anything at home is, as soon as you leave home and you drive more than half a tank away, you can't get back. So that's why hydrogen is all about doing it at refueling stations. So you have a network. If the only place to charge is at home, then going to see your granny in Edinburgh is going to be difficult.
Quite right. Okay, thank you. Next one is about the technology edge. What is our technology advantage versus our competitors?
Well, any technology, you look at cost, performance, and lifetime. They're the three parameters that you always look at. And you know, the thing that mediates cost, performance, and lifetime for an electrolyzer is current density. The higher it is, the better you are situated in that three-dimensional map. An alkaline electrolyzer is at best 0.5 amp per square centimeter, and PEM electrolysis between 3, well, we currently use 3 amps per square centimeter, which is 6 times as high, and we're moving to 4 amps per square centimeter. So, you know, our advantage is of being able to optimize between those 3 variables. We also manufacture nearly everything ourselves in the stacks, and so consequently we can pull the handles on more variables than any other manufacturer, which I think is very important.
And the next question, Graham, is about the estimated global demand for PEM electrolyzers over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so if you want to look at the EU, first of all, perhaps if you look at the EU and then multiply by 6 or 7 to get the global market. But today in the EU, in terms of a grey hydrogen, we use 400 terawatt hours of grey hydrogen. That's for a refinery's ammonia methanol. That relates to about 140 gigawatts of electrolysis, and that's just the existing market. And that 400 is set to get to net zero to 2000, which is a factor of 5. So you're looking at around 800 gigawatts of electrolysis in Europe alone. Astonishingly large numbers. So large, in fact, that whenever we talk to investors about them, they have to go away and do some research because they never believe how big it is. But, you know, to get to net zero, the world needs a lot of renewable power and a lot of green hydrogen.
Are we confident that ITM has sufficient financial resources to exploit the new opportunities for electrolyzers?
Yeah, I mean, when we raised 170 million, 165 plus the 7 million open offer, so 172 million. In the firm placing, we were 2.5 times oversubscribed. In the open offer, about 3 times oversubscribed. So, look, there's a huge interest in the capital markets in funding electrolyzer manufacturers and green hydrogen. Access to capital no longer seems to be an issue. you have now the whole of the renewable energy industry, the oil and gas industry, and the capital markets, all very enthusiastic about electrolysis. So I think the answer is yes.
And a practical question, how do you transport hydrogen safely?
Well, we work very closely with the largest transporter of hydrogen on the planet, which is Linde Praxair, and they've been doing it safely for 100 years. Their expertise is in transporting molecules. So you can do it with pressurized hydrogen in tube trailers. You can do it with liquid hydrogen in tube trailers and ships. You can use an energy vector, so you can make green ammonia and transport it, in which case you're transporting a liquid, or you can use a chemical hydride like toluene, which absorbs hydrogen, and then you can use that for transportation. But the hydrogen industry, people forget this, is huge already. As I said, 400 terawatt hours energy equivalent of hydrogen in Europe. And the safety record of the industrial gas companies is excellent in the area of hydrogen, particularly for transporting it.
And Graham, the next one, can you say a bit more about tidal power being used to generate hydrogen? That seems to have fallen out of the picture in recent years. Are there more projects planned?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't much tidal being deployed right now worldwide. I think that's a shame. The technology is not as well developed as wind or solar, and it certainly doesn't have grid parity, which wind and solar obviously do now in most places in the world. In fact, solar, if you look around the world, in many places is by far the lowest cost form of generation. So it's a cost structure issue for the renewable power generation. Anywhere where there's cheap electrons, you can make low cost green hydrogen. And as the market develops for tidal and wave, and the cost structure of those technologies come down to the point where it makes a commercial case for coupling with electrolyzers and making green hydrogen, then we'll be involved.
Okay. There was one question, I think, which I had skipped over. BP have announced a partnership with Orsted to develop green hydrogen plans. How might this affect ITM Power?
So I actually answered that question earlier, but I don't mind repeating it. It's a 200 megawatt unit. It's a refinery unit. It's recently been announced, and that's at an early stage of development. But as you probably know, we know Orsted very well. I'm not implying anything by that other than to say we are aware of the project.
Yeah, we're coming towards the end of the questions, Graham. Marathon session, thank you. What will the cost per megawatt be once the benefits of the new factory is ramped up?
So it depends on the size. Today we supply fully turnkey systems with ILE, quoted through ILE, for 0.8 million euros a megawatt at the 10 megawatt level, 10 megawatts and above. And our target mid-2020s is to get to €500,000 a megawatt. That would be in the mid-2020s. When the factory is up and running, certainly that has an effect, particularly with volume. Cost reduction, a number of areas. Volume through the factory, moving from a 2 megawatt module to a 5 megawatt module, and also reduction in the cost of the balance of plant by working with Linde to reduce the cost in the supply chain of all the balance of plant. So there's those three areas that result in cost reduction.
And the last question, Graham, is about Saudi Arabia. Do we hope to supply electrolyzers to the NEOM development in Saudi Arabia?
So the Neonin project has been announced, and the supplier of the green hydrogen there is Air Products. It's a project where the announcement was very large. I think it was 1 to 2 gigawatts of electrolysis. Actually, the first stage is 30 megawatts in size. Air Products work quite closely on this with ThyssenKrupp, and they're using alkaline electrolyzers for that project. ThyssenKrupp have a strong relationship with Air Products. They have a very strong political relationship in Saudi Arabia, hence them winning the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Graham. A message to say thank you for your generous answers and time from one of our questioners. There's just one remaining question. We will have to insist that this is the last one. Are you currently working on modules above 5 megawatt, or are you planning to do so?
Currently, no, there's no need. Actually, there's a trade-off between getting larger. So on the positive side of the trade-off is that as you increase the size of the module, you decrease the cost of the balance of plant and installation, because you have fewer interconnections, fewer buzz bars, pipe runs, all of those good things. On the negative side of the trade-off, the bigger you make the stack, the larger the percentage that you have to take out when you're doing any maintenance, particularly any preventative maintenance. Your 5 megawatt module, you can pick it up with a forklift, you can move it out, you can do some maintenance on it, and you can put it back in. And if you have a 100 megawatt plant, you're only taking offline 5%. If you make the whole plant out of 100 megawatts, you'd have to close the whole thing down. And so there's a trade-off. And we spent some considerable time working with Linda to work out what we felt the optimum would be for a given set of constraints to do with availability and maintainability. And 5 megawatts for hundreds of megawatts of plant feels about right. So that's the reason we're not going any larger.
Graham, thank you. That's a comprehensive set of questions. I'd like to thank everybody for their questions. I greatly welcome that degree of interest and excitement in what we're doing. We're always available to answer any questions that shareholders might have. But thank you very much indeed for all those questions, and I hope you found that session helpful. With that, we come to the end of our business today. There will be, as shareholders know, another general meeting on the 27th of November to consider the annual report and accounts, and notification to that effect should already has indeed already reached you. But for today, that is it. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.